What was the last book you read? Like full-on, paper pages, bound spine, can hold it in your hands book, or even an e-reader. Are you having trouble remembering? That's okay. You might not be alone. Recent studies have shown that the rate at which everyone is reading is way down, especially compared to a couple of decades ago. And we're not trying to shame you. It makes a lot of sense that people are reading less these days compared to pre-iPhone times. Think of all the things we now have access to. Our smartphones, social media, hundreds, if not thousands of TV shows to keep up with. But even though reading rates are down across the board, Generation Z seems to be singled out as the generation that is destroying books, taking a lot of heat for preferring to text or post selfies on Instagram rather than picking up one of these. But is it really true that teens are reading less these days? And are new digital distractions the reason why? Well, according to one study done by the nonprofit organization Common Sense Media, teens are reading way less for fun or entertainment than they once did. 30 years ago, about 9% of 17-year-olds claimed to never or hardly ever read for fun, like maybe once or twice a year at most. Fast forward to just a few years ago, and that number tripled, reaching 27%. That's more than a quarter of teens saying that they barely ever read for fun. This study caused a bit of an uproar when it first came out. The media struggled to figure out why Generation Z might not be as interested in reading anymore as previous generations. The normal culprits came up, of course: smartphones, video games, social media. But the entire story, see what I did there, is slightly more complicated than it might seem at first. If you think about reading in terms of single words consumed each day, some might argue we are reading more than ever before. This makes sense if you add up all the texts, tweets, headlines, emails, and listicles we are all reading on a daily basis. But this has some neuroscientists and book enthusiasts worried. This is because the way many of us read these days is more superficial than ever, and it's changing the way our brains are programmed. Instead of being able to read a long book with a deep comprehension, we are learning to process a lot of information very shallowly. This in and of itself might not be a terrible thing. In fact, human brains were never intended to read. Yes, you heard that correct. We have the genes for spoken language and vision, but not reading. We only really started to read and write about 5,000 years ago, which is not all that long ago on the evolutionary timescale. Scientists have looked into this, and it seems like reading was easy enough for humans to pick up because it uses the same part of the brain as speaking a language does. And so over the last 5,000 years, our brains adapted to reading long, mostly linear text. Until now. With how we read on the internet and short snippets here and there, jumping from hyperlink to hyperlink, our brains are becoming better at scanning nonlinear text and searching for key terms instead of reading something all the way through. And so when many of us who grew up reading on screens sit down to actually read a book, it becomes a lot more difficult to, read the whole thing through without skimming or missing major points. This does seem a bit concerning because reading comprehension is an important skill to have for all sorts of reasons. Firstly, it's a skill that's crucial for most, if not all, jobs and careers, but perhaps more importantly, it also might make you a better person. Various studies have found that reading fictional literature makes us more empathetic to other people. This is because when we read fiction, we often get an intimate look into other people's lives. But before you start freaking out about the downfall of civilization, at least as it has to do with reading, there's some more information we want to share with you. First of all, there's a chance we are gaining reading comprehension skills through none other than texting. One study found that people who spend more time texting have a higher reading comprehension than those who use their phones to talk. And for those who are lamenting the decline of literary reading, there's actually plenty of evidence that younger generations are still engaging with books and longer texts. Another survey, this time by the Pew Research Center, also looked into the reading habits of young Americans, and it found that 46% of 16 to 17-year-olds said that they read or listen to a book every day or almost every day. They found that this number even drops a bit as we move into our 20s and early 30s. The real kicker is that adults are actually reading a lot less than previous generations too. So Generation Z is still reading, and not just comments on their Instagram posts. This isn't so surprising when we think about the success of fictional books like Hunger Games, The Hate U Give, or The Fault in Our Stars. The appetite for young adult novels must be strong because the number of them published more than doubled between 2002 and 2012, when 10,000 YA books came out. And then there's the popularity of fan fiction. For those who don't know, fan fiction is exactly what it sounds like: fan-created fiction, usually written around characters that already exist in popular movies or books. There are not only millions of people who read fan fiction, but there are also millions and millions of pieces of this type of content all over the internet. It's huge. So what are you reading these days? Do you have a favorite book? Let us know in the comments below. And speaking of which, The Great American Read is a new show on PBS about our favorite books. It all leads up to a nationwide vote on America's favorite novel. Head to pbs.org/Great American Read to vote for your favorite book today. Check the link in the description for more details. And if you want to know more about what teens are up to, check out this episode on why vaping is so popular and this episode on should teen sexting be a crime. Till next time, guys, I'm your host, Myles. Bye.